people think of Phoenix, they think of the beautiful, moderate winter days and the outdoor activities and lifestyle, golf and tennis, the country club, hiking, biking, and all of these fun, amazing things. But Phoenix, did you know, does have a dark side. And there are several things that make up this dark side of Phoenix, and we're gonna cover all those today because not every city is perfect, and we're gonna hit those dark side aspects of Phoenix on this video today. But first, if you just wanna give us a call off the information on the screen, we'd be happy to talk to you directly about your situation, whether you're relocating, moving away, moving to, we'd be happy to help. We've been selling real estate for 19 years here in the Valley of the Sun, and we have over 450 5-star Google reviews to check out as well. Now, there's no escaping the first thing that really makes Phoenix on the dark side, and that is the heat. The excessive heat, guys. We have excessive heat here in the Phoenix area. We are in the middle of the Sonoran Desert, and in the Sonoran Desert, we have temperatures that soar well above 100 degrees for a good portion of the year. Now, being over 100 degrees when it's a dry heat isn't all that terrible compared to maybe the low 90s in other parts of the country with very high humidity. However, when we talk heat in the summertime in Phoenix, we're talking excessive heat, days over 110, and that is not so comfortable. In fact, in 2024, Phoenix did set a new record for consecutive amount of days at 110 or higher on the temperature scale, and that number, 56 consecutive days, topping the record that was set in 2023 of 55 consecutive days over 110 degrees. Guys, there's no way to slice it. That is hot. And is it getting hotter every single year? Now, if you look at some of the geological trends of temperature across the entire planet, the temperature is rising ever slowly over the course of time. But I've done a previous video on the climate of Phoenix, Arizona, and the temperature has only risen about 3 degrees over the past multiple decades. And so it is rising, but it's rising at a slow pace. Nonetheless, it's still very hot. In fact, the record temperature set in Phoenix recorded was in 1990 in July, and that was 122 degrees. And so when you think of summer, you think of it being hot, you're getting prepared for it, mentally prepared for it too. So June, July, August, and September even, yes, are quite hot. But when it gets into October, you're hoping for that break in the temperature. And guys, this year in 2024, it just did not happen. In fact, there was a record set, several records set at the beginning of October in which the temperature topped 106, 107 degrees in early October. Remember that old game you played when you were a kid, Uncle? That's when you want to cry Uncle and just have that heat be done, because that is not so fun. But at night, it gets cool, Kelly, right? I mean, at night, certainly the temperature is going to drop down, and yes, it's hot during the day, but it's going to get down to 60s or 70s at night. In the summertime, no, it doesn't. And that is the hard part. It is relentless. And in that summertime, it will be in the high 80s, sometimes even low 90s at midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, before maybe it dips down in the mid 80s to low 80s by 4 or 5 in the morning if we're lucky. But it stays hot the entire time, even at night. Now, I will say, when you're not in the sun and you're in the shade, it does play a huge role because that sun is hot. When you're in the shade, it does make it more bearable, and therefore, if you're going to do outdoor activities, it is best to do them early in the morning or have a shaded spot outside. Now, obviously, if you're playing tennis or golf and you're moving around a lot, it's going to be hard to keep it shaded. And so you have to play in the morning. And if you do, you need to drink a lot of water and have a ton of sunscreen. Remember those safari hats or those beach hats? Those are actually fairly common and get more and more popular here in Arizona because it does keep the sun more of your face and the back of your neck, which is very important. But guys, dehydration is a big thing here in Phoenix. Even when you feel like you're having a good time and you're managing the heat and the sun well, you need to keep drinking water because it hits you like that. We've had plenty of people that actually come down from the Midwest or East Coast in the summertime, and they go on a run or maybe they go hiking and they feel fine, but right into the middle of their hike or their jog, it hits them and they go down. And unfortunately, that is a very real thing that happens every summer. We see it. Matter of fact, I saw it firsthand when I was climbing Camelback actually 2 summers ago, and it was over 110 degrees that day. But I'm somewhat acclimated, and me and a good friend went up. We were well hydrated. We had sunscreen and shade, and we hiked Camelback Mountain, which is amazing to do. even in summertime if you're prepared for the heat. But on the way up there, we saw a lady that was actually struggling leaning up against a rock, a boulder, with her son who was in college. Well, come to find out, she did not do well. We had to call the paramedics, but they were from Illinois visiting, and they felt that it was hot in Illinois and they hike all the time there, so they could do it here. Well, it didn't turn out so well because we had to call the paramedics and they had to come down on a helicopter and airlift her off the mountain to get her to a local hospital to get her treatment. And guys, this happens a lot off multiple different hiking paths throughout the Phoenix area. There are airlifts via helicopter quite a bit because people assume they're going to be good to do something when they're not, and it's typically people who are coming from out of state. Another thing that the heat brings is higher electric bills. That's right, guys, your AC will run a lot. You need to have your AC checked twice a year when living in Arizona. You want your air conditioning running at the optimal standard to be able to produce that cold air consistently as the sun beats on it from the outside, so that it keeps it inside of your building or your house nice and cool. Your electric bill, which the AC runs off of, is going to be much higher in the summertime. You need to be prepared for that. But the good news is the two main electrical companies, SRP and APS, here in the Phoenix area, they do have equalizer plans, which allows you to basically take the average of all of your monthly bills and actually average them to one number equal across the entire year. So yes, it'll be more than what you normally would pay in the wintertime, but it'll be a lot less than what you normally would pay in the summertime, which allows you to keep a good budget to make sure you can manage your expenses with your income. And last but not least, it is good to buy a quality unit when living in Phoenix. The SEER rating of your AC will matter. The higher the SEER, the better rating the unit is, and therefore the more efficient it will become, and in the long run will help you on your electric bills, bringing them lower. Speaking of heat, another thing people aren't prepared for is the monsoon season. The heat brings a lot of the monsoons into the valley, and it typically happens in July and August, which are the 2 months that have the most monsoons. So what is a monsoon in the desert? Well, what happens is you have these haboobs. They are giant walls of sand that usually come from the south up to the north, and they just engulf everything, sometimes making visibility very hard when you're driving or walking around. But you don't want to be caught outside in one of these sandstorms because it is just not fun. It gets all the furniture in your patio dirty and dusty, and so you need to wipe that down over time, or hopefully it rains at some point. But it does typically rain with a monsoon, but not always. If it does rain, it dumps. And because the ground is not fertile soil, it does not soak up the water as it dumps down in 15-20 minutes all at once, and therefore it causes flooding or flash flooding. And so the desert washes through neighborhoods and through developments that help funnel that water down the right path so that people don't get caught either having their house being flooded or their backyard even, or a road in most cases. They are able to engineer around keeping retention areas in case they have flash flooding. If you don't respect that water when it's flowing hard, you can get caught. People always do every single year with their cars being high centered in one of these situations, or potentially they get caught on foot. So you just don't want to be out there in the water situation with monsoons. But outside of that, it's kind of fun, honestly, when it rains, because it doesn't rain very much in Phoenix. So being from the Midwest, I kind of like it when you switch it up and you have a little rain come down. Just saying, and my kids do too. And now that we're talking about water, another thing that's different in Phoenix is the grass. But I thought you don't have grass in the desert. Well, you can grow grass in the desert. In fact, a lot of homes have grass in their front or backyards. And a lot of commercial complexes, restaurants, retail, all that stuff, they have grass too in many cases. And so if you do have grass, the one pain is the fact that two different types of grass grow in the desert at different times of the year. The Bermuda grass grows naturally and will come in as weather heats up in April and May. And that will continue on through the summertime and the hot months. But then when the weather starts to cool a little bit in October, one thing you have to do is you have to scalp all of your Bermuda grass and let it die, and then plant rye or winter grass. Now, the winter grass is gorgeous. It takes about 2 to 3 weeks to come in once it's watered consistently, but that is beautiful grass to have from about October through April, May, when the Bermuda takes in and takes over. So just one extra expense you're going to have if you have grass, because you have to pay somebody, or you do yourself, to get the seed and water, fertilizer, the whole 9 yards to make that grass look nice for the winter time. Another dark side that Phoenix has is going to be the allergies. Guys, you would not think that allergies are a problem in the desert because it's a dry climate, but let me tell you, it is a problem. Unfortunately, a lot of people are sparked by all the desert blooms and plants that come up, especially certain times of year, like in the spring, And man, it is tough on people with allergies. Now, I'm thankful enough I don't have them, but my wife does and a lot of my friends do. And allergies can be pretty bad with all of the desert plant life in the desert. And alongside allergies is something called valley fever. Now, valley fever is awful. It can get into animals like pets, dogs. It can also get into humans. And if you do get valley fever, it is not fun to have. There is medication to take, but it takes a while to get off it. But valley fever is a respiratory issue that once it gets a hold in your lungs, it is tough to get a hold of. It takes a lot of treatment and it's very expensive and it's just flat out not fun. And it's kind of luck of the draw if you get it or don't, unfortunately. Most people don't, obviously. But what valley fever comes from is when the ground is constantly being tilled up and dust comes up from inside or under the ground and humans breathe it in, or dogs. And that's how a human or a pet can get valley fever, which you don't want to get. The next thing to discuss is the smog. Guys, Phoenix has a lot of smog. They call Phoenix the Valley of the Sun. So it sits down in a bowl in a valley surrounded by mountains almost on all sides. And because of that, pollution a lot of times is not able to escape the valley. It kind of hovers and sits right over the Phoenix area. So there are days where there has to be pollution advisories that are sent out. So people that have respiratory issues or breathing problems need to maybe stay indoors more than being outside or doing any activities that takes a lot of exercise or breathing. So if you're sensitive to smog and outdoor pollutants, there's certain times of the year, especially more in the summertime, where Phoenix is not a great place to be for those situations. And one of the drivers of smog, population growth. Guys, Phoenix is booming. It's one of the fastest growing cities and has been for quite some time in the United States. In fact, the population since 2020 has grown 1.2 to about 1.6% every single year, year over year. That is a lot of population growth to the Phoenix area, which is great for a lot of reasons, but there also are downsides to that as well. One of those downsides, traffic. Guys, traffic is a lot busier than it ever has been. And because it's grown so fast, the infrastructure wasn't ahead of that curve, primarily because what COVID did to the migration patterns of population. Phoenix was a big benefactor for that. However, because infrastructure was not ready to go, you now have construction on a lot of the major freeways. The I-17, the I-10, the Loop 101 all have major projects going on right now, and we'll have those ongoing for multiple years in the future. And so just driving around, there's just a lot more congestion and construction throughout the Phoenix area because of this population growth. Then on top of that, you have the snowbirds and the tourism that takes place. Now, this is vital to our economy in Phoenix because it provides billions of dollars every single year to our local economy, which we all love and benefit from. However, the downside is the traffic. The downside is the congestion. The downside is the annoying drivers that sometimes don't know how to drive in congested areas, and or if there's a little bit of weather potentially happening, like rain, oh my goodness. So unfortunately, you have to just deal with that certain times of the year. And there are major events that happen in Phoenix too. So you have to just know when those events are happening. Arizona Department of Transportation does a good job of making notice of certain things happening. So you can check that frequently when you're about to go on a trip or around town, to the other side of town, whatever it may be. But traffic, it's gotten worse. But guys, on a grand scale, it's not near as bad as other major cities like Seattle or Los Angeles or Chicago. So there's a lot of benefits there from that standpoint, but it's getting worse every year. It was not what it was just 15 years ago. Now that segues perfectly into cost of living. Cost of living has dramatically gone up, primarily why? The cost of housing. See, ever since the population exploded and the COVID population migrations took over and Phoenix had all these people coming in, they all wanted to buy houses, and they could because the places they were coming from were a lot cheaper than what Phoenix was at the time. And to this day, Phoenix is still undervalued compared to some of these major cities on the West Coast like Seattle and San Francisco and LA, San Diego, but it's gotten a lot more expensive. And again, it's not what Phoenix was just 5 short years ago. In fact, in 2020, the median home price was $290,000. In 2021, it was $340,000. In 22, it skyrocketed to $437,000. In 2023, $415,000. And in 2024, $435,000 at the beginning of the year, now finishing up around $450,000 towards the end of 2024. So the prices continue to rise despite having record interest rates this whole time. Right now, for a single person, they estimate it takes about $59,600 a year in income to live in Phoenix. That is about $4,900 a month. And if you're a family, they say it takes about $79,200 to live in Phoenix, or about $6,600 a month, making it about 22% higher than the national city in America for cost of living in Phoenix to live. The good news is groceries and healthcare are below the national average. The downside is transportation and public transportation and housing well above the national average. And overall, Phoenix is 13% higher than the national average for cost of living when it comes to all those different categories that make up one's ability to live in a city over the course of a month. And last but not least, we can't leave without talking about the wildlife. Guys, living in the desert, there's some crazy wildlife, from bobcats to javelina, these nasty pigs with these tusks, to rattlesnakes, the diamondback rattlesnakes especially, the scorpions, and the list goes on and on. So you have to be careful and cognizant of this type of wildlife that is in the desert when you're living down here. Now, you don't see it that often. In fact, I thought when I first moved down here, I'd see a rattlesnake all the time. I've only seen it probably 3 times in 19, 20 years of living down here in Phoenix. But you gotta be careful when you're on a hike. If it's the summertime, they love the heat. You have to be more cognizant of that. Take a stick with you, take a friend in case something happens. Make sure you have your cell phone on you. These sort of things will help when it comes to wildlife if you have an encounter. Scorpions, there are certain areas they're more prone to be in. They're more prone to be in areas where there's open desert wash. They're more prone to be in the mountainous areas. So you have to be just cognizant of that. And you want to have your pest control happening at least once every 2 months or once a month to make sure the food source of scorpions are gone, which is primarily crickets. And to make sure there's no openings in your house. Have the whole house sealed. There are companies out here that do that, and they will seal it to make sure things can't get into your house that are unwanted. And then there are bobcats, which they say are pound for pound one of the toughest animals in the entire animal kingdom, along with javelina. Guys, these javelinas are no joke. I actually got stuck in a courtyard of my house years ago with a javelina late at night coming home from the grocery store. And let me tell you about this experience. It was not fun. I had no idea. Thank God to this day, the front door was unlocked because I ran inside after I missed it when it charged at me, and then it came back at me and jumped into the door, jumped into the side window, left blood. It's a crazy story. If you call me, I'll be happy to tell you the whole thing, but it was wild. You just don't want to be around too close to those javelina, and they will leave you alone if they see you from a distance, but if you approach it, it will defend itself, and they are mean if they feel threatened. So best thing to do is just let them be, keep them at a distance, and you'll be just fine. And last but not least, termites, guys. We have what is called our subterranean termites here in the desert, so they are not as destructive. It's about a 7-to-1 ratio. So it takes the termites that we all know about in the Midwest and East Coast to destroy a property in 1 year. It takes these guys about 7 years. So they're a lot more prevalent. They come up from the ground through tubes, but they're not as destructive. So as long as you get them treated, should be no problem. And just keep a home warranty or warranty for your termite treatment on a record at all times, because it will be well worth it. Pro tip on that one. So no city is perfect, and Phoenix, like any other city, has its downsides, its dark side, and I hope we expose some of those issues for you today so you're fully prepared and know exactly what you're going into, eyes wide open, if you're making a move down here and you're not familiar with the area. If you are or are not, either way, we would love to chat with you about your needs and whatever you are looking to do, buying, selling, investing, relocating here to Phoenix. Give us a call at 480-660-5974. Check us out here on Instagram page at Kelly Cook Homes. We're putting out daily content for your education and enjoyment, of course. Don't forget to call me.